Welcome, everyone, to the Ultimate College Football Show. I am Tom Loy, joined in studio by former college football general manager Smoke Dixon and college football analyst Brad Crawford. Brad, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing well in North Carolina, man. How about you?
Love to see it. I'm doing great here in Nashville. Smoke, how are you, my guy?
I'm doing awesome. You know what? I'm doing so good because this house settlement got to us this weekend, Tom. I'm fired up to just
beautiful
talk about
segue.
What the heck is going on in college football?
Let's dive into it, my friend. It is time for the ultimate kick. The House settlement has been finalized. College athletics has been changed forever with the approval of the House versus NCAA settlement, which occurred on Friday. Beginning on July 1st, 2025, schools will begin revenue sharing with their own athletes. The current cap on that revenue is $20.5 million for all sports, but that cap increases by at least 4% each year during the 10-year agreement. But for more on this settlement, there's really only one person to talk to. Let's hear from 24/7 Sports national analyst Chris Hummer.
It's a sweeping settlement that changes the way college athletics will operate. Moving forward, there are new roster caps. There will be an NIL enforcement mechanism. Most importantly, perhaps, there's now revenue sharing where schools will distribute $20.5 million annually to their athletes, especially on the Power 4 level. $14 to $16 million of that is expected to go to football. You might think that sounds like professional athletics, and in a way it is, but there are just two things missing that leave the landscape of college athletics in a really unstable position. One, the NCAA still lacks an antitrust exemption, and two, athletes are not employees. And that leaves the doors open to many, many more lawsuits. Lawsuits have changed the way college athletics has operated over the last decade, starting with the Ed O'Bannon trial and potentially ending here with the House settlement. And moving forward, I think you're going to see lawsuits and challenges in the courts over fair market value in terms of compensation with NIL and the NIL Go program that's set to determine fair market value. You might see challenges over Title IX. You might see challenges over roster caps. You might see challenges from the states themselves, as several states have laws on the books that directly contradict the ruling of the new House settlement. So there's a lot of uncertainty in college athletics, despite the stability that the House settlement was supposed to bring. And I think this is a huge step for college athletics in a lot of ways, but there are still many shaky days and a lot of billable hours ahead for the sport as it tries to navigate this new landscape of not quite professional athletics.
Great stuff from Chris, as always. But Brad, everything you've gathered on your own, everything you heard from Chris, what are some of your takeaways?
This is long overdue, Tom, in college football. I think it also evens the playing field just a bit now that every power program moving forward is going to have access to, at minimum, $16.5 or so million a year to build its own football roster. I mean, you're still going to have elite programs surpassing that total every year. We've seen the estimated totals at Texas and Ohio State, but you know the recent trend of 5 stars being more evenly dispersed every recruiting cycle, that's going to continue. We've seen programs like Georgia Tech, Texas Tech, programs that have never signed 5 stars previously, all of a sudden entering that table conversation. So the days of Georgia, LSU, Alabama, for instance, signing 5 or 6 5 stars every cycle, that's over with.
Yeah, Brad, I don't know if you're over with is exactly what we'll say with those schools doing that. I still believe it's going to happen. Like, parity is not something that's going to be easily become something that we could do overnight. Because at the end of the day, the rich is always going to continue to get richer. And everybody else that's below the rich is going to stay that way. Because one of the things that I got from Chris Hummer was there's a collective bargaining agreement, Brad, that does not have there's a cap number without any collective bargaining agreement. That means none of the players agreed to this. So you put a number and a cap on a particular group of people without them understanding what their agreement is, or did they even agree to anything? So, Brad, my question is, yes, parity, but who's creating this parity?
I think the money is. I mean, you look at NIL collectives, there's so much red tape now that there wasn't before. Everything is over the table now. And what that means is with this new NCAA enforcement arm looking at basically every NIL deal valued at, what is it, $600 or more, Chris Hummer earlier in the segment mentioned fair market value. How is that going to be determined? NIL is not going to end, but with schools now able to pay these players directly, the impact of these outside deals that are, brokered away from the realms of like a player contract, those are going to diminish. So I think there's several NIL employees at various elite programs right now sweating a little bit because those jobs, man, may end here in the near future.
Well, Brad, you and I both know, we talked about it earlier. The main reason for going to the salary cap outlook of college sports in itself is to remove the collective from it, to remove the boosters from it. Because the days of having a collective being able to be a resource towards funding the schools that we're talking about, the top 5 schools, they're removing that from it. The days of having a booster, having a big-time company of saying, you know what, I want to give Tom Loy a $2 million deal, but we're only going to pay him $50,000 from our own allotment. Those days are being removed. So there's where personnel is coming into charge. That's where your general manager is there to now structure the proper deals. So the schools that don't have that general manager, that don't have that salary cap type structure, they might be behind the times, Tom.
I'm just kind of curious, when you bring up general manager to the casual college football fan, if they see their school doesn't have a general manager, you see that they have a director of player personnel or they have a chief of staff, I mean, is title important, and how important is it to really have somebody in that general manager role?
Well, it's ultra important when you're talking about the current market that we're in, Brad, because the teams that don't have one typically only go in one phase. And I always say there's 3 phases of what we are considering now in college athletics for general managers. You have the recruiter, the one that understood how to get on the phone and put together a list to get players in front of coaches. Then you had the evaluator, the one that was stuck in the room, just knocking out film, doing a whole bunch of reports, and could put a board together. Then you had the salary cap guy that's now just come into play in the last couple of years that understand the structure of what you have in your collective now to allocate those funds out to those players. But if you don't have a unicorn, which I would say, which is all 3 of those, then you're in a tough situation. Because now each department is going to have to go out now and have 3 separate entities trying to work together. So, Brad, we know that it's ultra important to move forward right now. Because
you mentioned that third role being like the banker of sorts for every program, trying to figure out these salaries and, of that $60.5 million each year, how much is my quarterback getting? How much am I paying each defensive end? You have to fund your 2 deep as well. So you've got to have justifiable, solid talent on the second team in case some of them guys get injured. So it's a very interesting new era in college football. As a money guy myself, I kind of like the idea of having someone in charge at each major program of how much we're earmarking for certain positions, because obviously a quarterback is worth more than, say, a starting cornerback.
All of this is kind of interesting because you have somebody, getting that GM title, like a Chad Bowden at USC. But then you have somebody that I know does it all down in Georgia, like Will Myers. So I'm just kind of, I don't know. I don't think that the title really matters as much, but I am kind of curious, Brad, and I'll start with you because I'm curious from both of you guys, especially Smoke with your experience. But Brad, the on-field experience, do you think with this kicking off in July, do you think it's going to impact what we see come August, September in this season?
I don't think we see the biggest impact happening, Tom, this season on the field, but certainly when the early signing period begins in December, we're going to see major changes. And then eventually how rosters look in 2026 from spring practice when you kind of get those guys for the first time and then beyond. For the most part, teams already have their 2 deeps signed, for instance, this fall, but player retention after this season is going to be a lot more advantageous for programs that are trying to hold on to their top talent when the transfer portal opens and that sort of thing around Christmas, because of this revenue share now and the ability for schools to pay talent directly. There are several programs, Tom, in the SEC that aren't, perennial top 10 programs that had to open their checkbooks last season to retain starting quarterback, edge rushers, and those kind of things. And I think moving forward, that's going to be easier now to retain some of your best players.
Brad, most guys that I've talked to in the personnel world, they've done a really good job of front loading a bunch of these contracts, meaning they paid out a lot of these guys already. So they're anticipating the July 1st hitting to where those big numbers, and where we're saying 3x, 5x in some programs, it wouldn't truly affect what your cap value is going to be on this season. But there's some other teams that didn't anticipate it because no one really knew if this was going to be in play for this year or next year. So at the end of the day, there's some big numbers out there, Brad, that a lot of these teams aren't going to be able to cover. So when this transfer portal hit in December, you're going to see some names of some players, I believe, that's going to be out there looking for a new home. And their market value is now being corrected by what we're seeing now in terms of the cap. Because if you're getting paid $4 million in the old cap and it's now retroactive to this cap, and you only have $16 million, well, that number doesn't add up if the production isn't there and it's for one player.
I want to jump in here. We do have a lively chat going on right now, and I got this tossed in by the producer. But LL tossed in the chat, are the players employees of the university now? Brad, start with you, man.
I mean, I think they are. We can throw out the term student athlete. That's been extinct, for half a decade now. But officially, the phrase amateurism is dead. It rings true here in June. I mean, this is what the results of this House settlement realize now. These are semi-pro athletes, professional athletes, call them what you want, but all these guys within the two deep at Power 4 programs are getting paid some monetary figure, and that just ends amateurism, in my opinion.
Yeah, Brad, I'm going to say no. I don't think you're an employee, because if you're an employee, most employees have unions, and you don't. No. CBAs, you don't. They're just getting paid basically 1099. Like, you see what I'm saying? So they're not truly employees of the university. They're just contracted independent workers for that 6 months or that calendar year, and they can get up and leave and go somewhere else.
So they're at-will employees, essentially.
At the end of the day.
Well said, Brad. I know we have some burning questions at the top of the show sometimes at the bottom. How about right now from Caniac Crazy 98? We got Hear Me Out. With kids getting paid by schools, what is the chance someone stays and plays college football forever? It's being set up as minor leagues anyway. Huh. Thoughts?
Yeah, you come to me first for that, Brad. Yeah, they're not going to be in there forever.
Yeah.
For the simple fact, because even though it looks like some guys are sticking around for 9 or 10 years, once you get into school, your clock starts.
Right.
You got 5 years to get out of there. If you do have an injury, medical max 6, because we're not looking at the pandemic anymore for the results of those guys, or we're not going to the formula of the
6
JUCO.
seems low as of late, though. I've seen some 7, 8. I mean, it's yeah.
That because of the pandemic and the whole entire JUCO format that's thrown in there. But I can see where a lot of players are prolonging their college careers. And talking to some of my NFL scouts, general managers, and guys within that world, guys aren't really that anxious,
right,
to go play college. I mean, to play in the NFL, because they're getting paid a lot of money.
Just to leave college in general.
Just
they may not have an NFL future.
No.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, Tom, if you look at it, Brad, if I'm in college and I'm getting $1 million and I'm getting my housing taken care of, all my meals taken care of, and I have a car, if I turn pro and I'm getting my base minimum is $875,000, I'm getting taxed on that 45%. I have to find my own place to live. I have to take care of my own food. So at the end of the day, I'm losing money going to the pros rather than staying in college with the understanding that I might have an opportunity to get drafted in the second or third round. Yep. If I increase my production, if I increase my pay. So for a college athlete, I'm saying, hey, listen, I'm going to play the long game. The long game is to get the for sure money right now that's college, rather than go to the NFL and having to take up adult responsibilities.
Yeah, if I'm not a projected day one pick in the ensuing NFL draft, I'm telling the agent or my family or whoever is representing me to my university, I'm staying in school. Find me a new program for my final season. One where I can start, better my draft stock, and make more money. We saw last year there were several quarterbacks, I won't mention names, that came out who got drafted on day 3 who might have been better off using another year or two of eligibility to make a higher payday. Now, we've seen coaches say, you want to keep your legacy and that sort of thing. I don't know if all that's going to continue in college football with the way we're headed. When guys, like you said, Smoke and Tom, you can make more money still playing in college football than you can being a late NFL draft pick.
I mean, I'll say it. You clearly, there was a lot of chatter around Quinn Ewers. Should he come up?
Yeah.
Should he go pro? Should he stay in college? There was this multi-million-dollar offer from Notre Dame, supposedly, that was on the table. People around the program denied it. I'm pretty sure it was happening, but I think it's all up for debate. But we did have another comment. I wouldn't call it a question back on our YouTube page, but it's Andrew says, I want to see one-time transfers. After that, you are SOL. What's your take on, Brad, I'll start with you. What's your take on, should they just be limited to one, or can they have multiple at this point?
I think if we're going to limit players to one, we should limit coaches to one, right? But that's not going to happen. What we really need to figure out, NCAA-wise, whoever's running the show there in Indianapolis, is
no idea.
we need to determine, what eligibility is in college football. Do you get 4 years and then you get one medical red shirt? Do you have to sit out a year after you transfer? Should you be immediately eligible? I mean, what kind of penalties are involved? We've got so many guys now that are vying for a 7th and 8th year of college football because the rules are so gray. We need to figure out, what is this? You have 5 to play 4 type thing, and set it in stone so that we don't have all this bureaucratic nonsense and then lawyers getting involved with players trying to extend their careers.
Brad, when you talk about just rules and laws, then you have to go all the way back to, why do we create this salary cap? And is there a collective bargaining agreement? Because if you're only allowing me as a player to transfer one time, you're limiting my opportunities to earn as much as I possibly can. Because on the open market, if I'm worth 3 times as much than staying at University A, I should be able to have that opportunity to go.
Absolutely.
And if the salary cap or the revenue cap or whatever word that they want to use goes up a percentage each year, then a player should be able to go out and negotiate on the free market or in-house to be able to get paid or compensated as much as possible if the revenue sharing always goes up and increases.
But how many multi-time transfers are actually going to get 3 or 4X at their third stop? I mean, I can kind of count on one hand how many guys have actually played at a 3rd or 4th school and been a dominant player. So I think it's not a red herring, but you have to think about, Smoke, how much of these guys actually, when they're on their multiple 3rd or 4th transfer, are making an impact at these programs.
I mean, you're going pro after the 2nd stop. Like if you're doing that well, there's really no point for the 3rd. Like, so it doesn't really, they're not going to get financially compensated that strong if they need to go for a 3rd stop.
But both of you guys are saying both of those theories are outliers, right? But what the NCAA has done and what most rules have done, Brad, is put everybody in a box.
Yeah.
And I think you can't do that because there's always a one-off. And if there is a one-off, then that's where we start ending up again in courts, in the lawsuits. If you just make it a rule and abide by it and live by it, I think you'll get to what you want because like you both said, there are only a handful of guys that are even good enough or willing to leave school A, B, or C.
Right.
But there are some guys that just got picked. There's one guy that we can talk about right now, the 1st overall pick, that went to 3 schools and leveled up pretty well. So if you take that away from a young man like that, does he get the opportunity to be the 1st overall draft pick in an NFL draft?
I mean, no argument with that. I mean, obviously Cam Ward is a different situation. Pick number 1 of the Titans. All you Nashvillians are fired up about. I think he's a special talent. But I do want to move on to one more comment here from the YouTube. Clearly, that thing is buzzing right now. It kind of fires me up. But we got a question from Home Squad Sports. Will we see some P5 programs implement JV teams filled with mostly high school recruits to develop? Brad?
It's funny you say that. Oklahoma a few weeks ago took Mercer starting quarterback for probably pennies on the dollar to be the backup quarterback to John Mateer, yet Mercer couldn't afford him anymore. That's essentially a JV player right there, right? That's the kind of stuff that I think new college football, I guess, messes up fans' minds and as far as wanting to follow this sport, because you have a star at a small program like Mercer who took just a little bit more money to go to Oklahoma, where he's never going to see the field unless something happens to the guys in front of him. So we're not going to see JV teams or that kind of thing. But I mean, it's a fair question though, especially with this new era.
Great question. Here's the answer. Right? There's a JV already. It's called the Group of Five. Right? The
Ouch.
P4 schools are using the G5 schools and FCS programs as your JV. So it's already created within our market, because most of those prospects, they aren't getting compensated as much as the P4 schools are giving their players. So I, as a general manager at Maryland, would always look Division II, Division I AA, Division III.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my feeder system. And if you're doing it right, you find ways to get the best, level them up, pay them pennies on a dollar, because they're getting nothing anyway, and get them up to your level. Now you're going to get the best bang for your buck. And again, we're in an operating world of a salary cap. If I can get a starting offensive lineman from an FCS school that I'm only paying $200,000,
Yeah.
while somebody else is paying $2 million for a freshman coming into college that's not going to play for 2 or 3 years, yeah, that general manager should get fired, because you're paying for someone that does not have immediate impact. If they got to sit down and not play for 2 years, Brad, you're losing $4 million a
Expensive
year.
seat holder. Yeah.
While I just sat and leveled up and got a $200,000 player starting at right or left tackle that's going to play the best for me. So I think that question probed, what are you going to do now? Are you going to create a high school salary cap and put a cap on it? Because the freshman cap is the one that throws everything off. Everything in-house can be taken care of because we're judging on production and performance. High school players, you're judging on projection and potential, which potential and projection gets most good guys moving with a big truck, and you're putting up a for sale sign in front of your house.
Brad, I did want to ask you one more quick question, and Smoke, if you want to chime in, please do. But is there any negative to just letting schools spend as much as they want, report everything, just be transparent? I'm not really sure who would have lost in that situation.
I think in that situation, I mean, the whole parity argument goes out the window then, because then you're going to have the programs who just print money with, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue every year, fielding the best rosters. We saw last season, Ross Bork, the AD at Ohio State, came out and said publicly, we had the most expensive roster in college football. What was estimated, 20 million or so? And now Texas has a $40 million roster. I know Sark says that's not true, but that's been the reported number. So just in 2 years, 2 cycles, Tom, we've seen the most expensive roster in college football almost double. Imagine what it's going to look like 5 years from now.
Brad, Tom, the question you should ask is what we've been living through in college sports until this weekend and moving forward. Like, the rich stays rich. The ones that can print money, the ones that got oil money, the ones that can have 3 or 4 misses on whatever star that we want to give them and still operate in that world, yeah, that's what college football and college sports has been this entire time.
If I'm a small school, I'm taking that as a challenge, Brad, and I'm going to spend as much as possible to bring a natty to my school.
But Tom, you don't got the money.
Ball factor,
it don't matter.
There might be a big booster somewhere at a small school that says, you know what, Smoke, I'm coming.
They should have ponied up a long time ago.
All right, let's move on.
Beast,
Go ahead.
Mr. Beast could afford to give $100 million to East Carolina.
There it is. There it is.
Football playoff team, okay?
Perfect example. Mr. Beast, sign up. All right, let's move on. We got some other news to talk about. It was revealed over the weekend that Oregon receiver Evan Stewart suffered a knee injury last week, and the expectation is that he's going to miss all or at least most of the 2025 season. He's a former 5-star coming off a 2024 campaign where he totaled 613 yards and 5 touchdowns. Brad, I will start with you. Obviously, this is a big blow, but tell everybody else, what's your take? How big of a blow is this for the Ducks?
Yeah, from losing Trayshawn Holden and Tez Johnson, your top 2 targets last year, you sort of had a shoe-in fit with your former 5-star transfer in Evan Stewart, and now he's hurt, and I've been told likely going to miss at least 2.5 months. Well, that's the entire regular season for Oregon. And Oregon has to get back to that 10-11 win threshold to get back to the playoff. in the Big Ten. So if I'm Dante Moore, I'm a little bit worried about this because this is a guy that was probably going to have 75 catches, 1,100 yards, probably double-digit touchdowns. So now Will Stein, the OC there in Eugene, he's got to figure it out, man.
Yeah, you're missing your number one target right now, but that's on paper. We don't know what Dakorien Moore is going to be, right? And what usually get me, Tom, whenever I used to sit in the room as a general manager and something happens to the team with the injury or players not performing at the level that it's the coaches were always going to a panic and said, "What are we going to do?" My answer to them was, "I got two more guys that can play as good." But we all have to remember, this is college football. This is not professional football. You can't go out and get somebody in. So you do have somebody in place, Dakorien Moore, that can get it done. And then now it's on Will Stein as well to create somewhat of a system to help out your young quarterback. They have a running back they can lean on. They went into the portal and went heavy on offensive linemen, Brad. So if that's the case, and you say, you know what, instead of the 75 targets, we got to create 75 touches throughout the running back room, throughout our tight end room, to now combat the explosive plays that we are missing. But also, Will Stein, it's your job to create and design plays to make sure that this offense can still function. And again, if he does come back at the end of the season, all you have to do is just get into the playoffs. You don't have to go undefeated anymore. And I'm looking at Oregon's schedule. They still could do that. Evan Stewart was not a one-game or two-game changer. Good football player, but he's not Jeremiah Smith to Ohio State's offense. He's just a piece of it, not the biggest piece of it.
If I'm one of those guys in the Oregon receiver room too, Tom, I'm looking at this as a major opportunity. I'm licking my chops that wide receiver one is on the mend for the next several months. I've got to beat a 17 or 18-year-old true freshman for that spot now. A guy like Gary Bryant, he was Oregon's top receiver 2 years ago. Didn't play much last year, now has a chance as a veteran fifth-year player to really come up and, lead the Ducks. And then Malik Benson, they paid a lot of money for him from FSU, big-time transfer. Probably was going to start at one of those wide receiver 3 positions, now has a chance to move into the 1 spot. So Bryant, Malik Benson, there's more than just Evan Stewart in that roster.
I mean, I will say on Dakorien Moore, I've seen him a ton in high school. I know Mike Roach probably seen him anywhere on any network. I mean, the former 5-star is one of the most talented players I've ever seen. I remember he was talking to Keelan Russell at a 7-on-7, really like telling him, hey, you can't throw this ball here. You can't. He was like calming his quarterback down, and it was one of the most impressive things that I've seen from a leadership standpoint. I mean, Dakorien Moore I think he is going to be a breakout star in college football, even more so. I know some people might be like, oh, Evan Stewart's down. Can he still do it without that true number one alongside of him? But I think Dakorien Moore is going to set college football on fire, and I think he's not ready to throw the term generational out there, but I do believe he is an elite freshman All-American caliber player.
Brad, when I studied Dakorien Moore,
Yeah.
and I'm watching him, and I'm like, this is one of the cleanest receivers in terms of being college ready that I've studied in a long time. Not saying he's the best, not saying generational, but in terms of route savvy.
Yeah.
That means getting on the top of his route, being able to have subtle movements to create separation. Easy hands catcher. Like you said, I've never been around him, but just the maturity level of understanding how he fits into an offense. And the game never felt like it was sped up to him. He was always in total control of the way that the game was being played and how he was handling the DB or the way that the defense was structured to stop him.
Brad, I want to dive into their summer agenda. We started this, I think, a week or so ago, and obviously it's Oregon Ducks up next, but they're forced to game plan without Stewart. I know you recently wrote that it's all about Oregon boosting the confidence of Dante Moore. He's not necessarily been named the transfer starter for the Ducks, but how do they make that happen, and is this a blow for them?
Yeah, that came out long before the Evan Stewart news, and this is not something that Ducks coaching staff wanted to deal with here in June, a few weeks before fall camp begins. I think you let Dante Moore know that we're not going to put it all on your shoulders this season. However, the last 2 quarterbacks here were Heisman finalists. Former transfers, too, just like you, Dante. Bo Nix from Auburn, Dylan Gabriel from Oklahoma, and both them guys put up sexy numbers in Will Stein's offense. So the expectation is for Dante Moore to have a 3,000 yard, 35 touchdown season. But as Smoke mentioned minutes ago, Mekhi Hughes from Tulane had over 1,000 yards rushing last season. I think he's going to get a steadier dose of the football this season, and you're going to have a more balanced attack at Oregon. I'm not tossing all my chips on Oregon, not being a playoff team just because of this injury to Evan Stewart. I think if you lost a quarterback or, a bigger position maybe than wide receiver one, it could have been a bigger factor. But I do think Oregon maybe wins one fewer game without Evan Stewart, as long as Dakorien Moore and Gary Bryant, some of those guys, Malik Benson, can step up in his absence.
Yeah, when you talk about structure and play, they invested in Isaiah World, an offensive line, Emmanuel Pregnon, an offensive line, and like you said, Brad, Mekhi Hughes. When you do that, you're getting ready and getting yourself prepared for Big Ten football. And I think they learned their lesson from last year of understanding what it's going to take to end up winning at the end of the season. Because last year, they went undefeated. But Dante Moore is your quarterback now for the future. So you have to set him up in a role of, right now, managing the game until opportunities arrive to you for you to take the game over. So we are going to be a 60-40 team, meaning we're going to run the ball 60% of the time, throw it 40% of the time, and be more calculated in the throws that we make. Because we know right now our number one targeted receiver is down for this year. So how many other ways can we create positive plays for a young guy to come in and have confidence at the end of the season? If our number one guy does come back, we can now take him, put him in place, and we don't miss a beat because we've ran the ball well. We've improved on our left side of our offensive line, our guard and our left tackle, in order to protect our young quarterback. And a lot of RPO plays, run pass opportunities, you saw Dylan Gabriel take advantage of, which a young quarterback should be able to do at the end of the day.
Yeah, you mentioned Dylan Gabriel. I mean, I think that was the key for Dante Moore and why I'm personally extremely excited for him this year. I think he's gonna be one of the top quarterbacks in America. I think he's gonna put on a show. I mean, yeah, I think that having Evan Stewart would have absolutely helped, and I would have loved to see him alongside Dakorien Moore. And I think that obviously helps any quarterback when you have two elite talents. But the ability to go out in the offseason, add offensive linemen, like you said, have a strong running game, Brad, like you mentioned. I mean, I think it all points to a successful season for Oregon, and no reason that they shouldn't still be talking national championship.
Tom, every year when we go into college football, there's always a new name that just pops up on us in terms of a first-year or second-year guy. Who would be a first- or second-year guy that could come in that Oregon Duck fans need to know?
I mean, we've talked about Evan Stewart and the replacement there. I mean, the guy I'm watching is Jeremiah McClellan, the 2024 signee. I think he's a guy that can surprise a lot of people. He's a guy that I've seen in person. I remember I went out to a game with him and Jeremiah Love, your guy. And Jeremiah McClellan looked like the best player on the field that night. I think they were playing in Indianapolis on the road. And this is a guy, look, he had 3 catches for 24 yards last season, didn't do much. I think he's a guy that is going to break out. He's complete. He's a polished route runner. He was a top 100 player for us at 24/7 Sports, and Andrew Ivins, our director of scouting. So big fan of Jeremiah McClellan. I'm not calling him like a breakout, like freshman All-American, well, obviously as a sophomore, but I think that he's going to be a guy where if he's given an opportunity, I think he's going to surprise a lot of people this fall.
Yeah, and I can agree to that. I mean, when you have a player with his skill set, size, right, strength, and run after the catch ability, Brad, at the end of the day, just get the ball in his hands. And on any means, you can shovel pass it to him. And a lot of what they did last year was great opportunities in RPO world. And again, if you're running the ball at an optimum level, run pass opportunities in windows behind that second level, because most guys are going to step up when you're running the ball that well, linebackers. Now you have an easier target at the second level to play pitch and catch with a young quarterback and a young receiver.
We've talked a ton about offense when it relates to the Oregon Ducks, so let's move on to the Miami Hurricanes and talk a little bit about their offensive structure and their summer agenda. Brad, you were focused on them maintaining their offensive approach as they replaced Cam Ward with Carson Beck. So how do they get that done, and how do they have success there in Coral Gables?
Yeah, if I'm Shannon Dawson, the play caller there in Coral Gables, I need to make sure Carson Beck is not only confident in my game plan, but he's comfortable with what I'm asking him to do. And I sort of allow him to play without a leash. I think sometimes Mike Bobo at Georgia, where Carson Beck was the quarterback the last 2 years, he sort of played under the system too much, pro style system. Carson Beck might not be that guy, might be a better spread quarterback like Cam Ward was. And what made Cam Ward the top pick in the draft so effective last season was his ability to, sometimes hit his third and fourth reads while extending plays. Now, Beck's not known for his escapability, but I do think he's going to put up better numbers in the ACC than he did last season in the SEC at Georgia. Miami spent a lot of money on resources around Carson Beck to make sure the passing game is still there too. Y'all got to remember, Miami lost his top 3 or 4 pass catching targets last season and then did a great job of replacing some of those guys, especially getting Marion from BYU post spring. So Beck has weapons around him, but it's up to Shannon Dawson to make sure he's the perfect fit within this scheme and he's comfortable going through these progressions and reads.
Brad, you said Shannon Dawson. The first thing I hear when you say Shannon Dawson is air raid.
Yeah.
Get the ball up in the air, throw it around the yard, play grass basketball, speed and space. I don't think that's the best skill set or how you want Carson Beck to play. I think Carson Beck, when he's under control and he understands where all his reads are, I think that's the best player that you're going to get. And when Miami ran the ball last year and they didn't ask Cam Ward to play hero ball, I thought their offense and their game plan was more effective. Yeah. And when you are Shannon Dawson and you're throwing the ball around 40 times a game, what happens is your defense does not get time to rest. You don't build on wearing down a team and physically just putting your will and making your opponent submit. And I think the way that Miami is building themselves and the way that when you look at the roster and how they're currently constructed, like you don't go out and get Shamar Brown, a running back, to come in and throw the ball around. You don't get Alex Ballman, the transfer portal from Tulane, which I believe was one of the better blocking tight ends to throw the ball around. I think when you can
don't let Isaiah Horton take more money to go to the SEC in Alabama.
Well, you do that. You do that with the understanding that we threw the ball around for a ton. We had the number 1 overall quarterback taken, Cam Ward, the best player in college football last year. He didn't win the Heisman, but the first overall pick, and you still didn't get to the college football playoffs. So at the end of the day, you have to self-scout and research yourself and say, what's the best formula for us in the ACC? What's the best formula to get to the end of the season healthy, our team playing with like a well-oiled machine, being able to run the ball to cancel out the time, not allowing our head coach to make some mistakes that we've seen him make by slowing the game down. The more opportunities that you give your opponent, the less the chance gets for your wing value to go up. And I think they're set up perfectly with a veteran quarterback to understand I just need to manage games. And when I'm asked to win games, I can put the cape on my shoulder with those young, talented freshman receivers. Malachi Tony's one of them, in order to come out with the victory.
I feel like the way you're talking about Carson Beck is similar to how you talked about Drew Aller in Penn State, like be a game manager, but also put that cape on when we need you. But so as long as he goes and he plays well, that's as far as Miami's going to go. So I wanted to ask Brad, actually, they recently landed 5-star offensive lineman Jackson Cantwell. For Hurricanes fans, sorry, he's not there yet. So dive into the offensive line. I mean, Alex Mirabal, one of the best offensive line coaches in America. How good is that going to be? How good is that group going to be? And also, can they keep Beck upright?
Yeah, I spoke to a source, Tom, close to the program in Miami a couple of weeks ago during my spring phone cycle. And he told me that this is the best offensive line Miami's had, certainly in Mario Cristobal's tenure, but maybe in the last decade. A couple of first rounders up there up front expected the next couple of drafts. You got the Brockermeyer transfer from TCU. The Hurricanes are set up to assist Carson Beck in this new look offense with all these new weapons. And as Smoke pointed out, I mean, Mark Fletcher's back in the running back. They got a couple other ball carriers back there who are veteran guys. If there is a balanced attack, I think that would better suit Miami than what they had last year, where, as we mentioned, Cam Ward was forced to play hero ball at times because the defense gave up so many big plays, so many chunks, and just did not get enough takeaways late in games. Now, the big question for me with Carson Beck and this offensive line is not only do you have to maintain possession, but you've got to swat the turnover bug. Carson Beck was one of the SEC's leaders in picks last year. That can't happen at Miami if the Canes expect to win 10 plus games and get to the expanded playoff.
I just wanted to add real quick on that was just because you're talking about the offensive lineman, just a name to know, S.J. Olufatuli, one of the top centers guards in America. I think he's probably going to play center there. But that kid is special, and he's going to be a guy that plays early for the Canes. So Miami fans get excited about that kid, one of the top overall players in the country.
Well, Brad, you touched on it. The more Carson Beck threw the ball, like you saw him make bad decisions. And, and that's in every gunslinging quarterback and every quarterback. As an offensive coordinator, you have to know the limitations of your players. And once you say, you know what, his hit rate is 35 throws.
Yeah.
Once he gets to 35 throws, everything from there are questionable decisions. And that's all great quarterbacks. You have to get through those bad throws in order for you to now understand who you are as a player and who you could be as in terms of being a playmaker. If you look in the NFL, you got Patrick Mahomes. Patrick had to go through that same thing. Josh Allen had to go through the same thing. Lamar Jackson, they're all going through the same cycle of understanding how to play winning football. And as talented as quarterbacks are, one of the biggest things that when you're an offensive coordinator, Brad, that you do when you fall in love with a talent, say Carson Beck, is to go out there and say, you know what, let's try to get him to win the Heisman. And then you start putting bad plays out there.
That would be a horrible
And
recipe.
you're giving more opportunities for the other team to get the ball back.
Yeah.
But again, playing complementary football has always won. As much as we saw, and I'd go back to the NFL model of Josh Allen winning the MVP last year for the Buffalo Bills. That wasn't his best statistical year.
Yeah.
But he managed the game all the way to when he was needed in the playoffs, fourth quarter, later on during the season, where I can now run the ball and take more hits and be a playmaker instead of starting the season out that way and putting myself in harm's way. But again, that offensive line, like you said, sturdy. Tight end, Alex Bowman, that they got in the transfer portal, one of the best blocking tight ends. You got a 1-2 combination of Brown and Fletcher Jr. in the running of football in a watered-down league. That's the ACC, and you only have Clemson to say, you know what? That's a team that we got to go get. And at the end of the day, the young players on Miami got to show up as well, too. Because if you study them last year, you saw a bunch of old guys and veteran guys just getting worn down. And when you have an injury there, who's going to be the young guy up? So for the guy that has all the intel, all the young guys that's coming in, and we're looking around, there's always a young name that the Hurricane Nation is always saying, you know what, we need a guy. So we're not relying on spending $2 or $3 million in the cap that we have to manage. So who's that young guy, Tom, that's going to be the buzz in October?
I'm gonna stick with 2024 signee like I had with McClellan in Oregon, but I'm gonna go with Marquise Lightfoot. He's an edge rusher, a guy that I know Andrew Ivins, our director of scouting, Cooper Patagna like a lot. We saw him in San Antonio at the All-American Bowl. This kid is a guy who he saw action in 6 games. I'm not sure that he registered a stat at all, but this is a guy that I think is going to absolutely burst on the scene in year 2. He's got this ferocious, violent temperament, great kid off the field, but a kid that's just got a tremendous motor. He's long, he's athletic. There's a lot to like about him. I expect him to play a ton, and I expect him to make a lot of plays if given the opportunity, like I think he will.
And the beauty behind that, Brad, and I'm glad you touched on the defensive lineman and edge player.
Yeah,
you can't have enough of those guys on the football field that's going to help in your rotation. So your frontline guys, I'm always talking about when you defensive linemen, who's 5, 6, 7, and 8. Because who 5, 6, 7, and 8 is going to tell me and be a determining factor of what type of ball you're going to be playing in November. Because if you wear those frontline guys down and they take a beating, they have 300-pounders on them all day, punching them, slapping them down to the ground, taking on double teams, which could be 700 pounds. I don't care how well conditioned you are as an athlete. After a period of time, the wear and tear adds up. And the longer that you go throughout the season and you're playing 70% of the reps, when it comes to playoff time, end of the season time when you're supposed to be well-oiled and energized, yeah, your guy Lightfoot is going to be the guy that's going to say, you know
100%.
what? He gave our edge guys enough rest without a drop-off in play to have us ready at the end of the season to play good, physical, winning football when it counts.
Brad, I hope you're okay with this, but we're going to talk some South Carolina football. Hope you're all right with that. But nobody knows the Gamecocks more than you. You know it. I know it. Smoke knows it. So let's just look at the summer agenda. If running back Rahsul Faison isn't cleared by the NCAA, what do the Gamecocks do? Where do they turn?
This is bad news for South Carolina if it doesn't happen. And I've been told by several people close to that program that the longer this extends into June and then into SEC media days in July and fall camp in August, it might not happen for Rahsul Faison. Now, that said, they've got Oscar Attaway, who transferred from North Texas last cycle. He played a good bit last season. They've got Jawarn Howell, who looks a lot like Derrick Henry. He don't have the numbers yet, but he's a huge guy, 6'3", 225 or so from South Carolina State, transfer last cycle too. They feel real good about him. But outside of Attaway and Howell, you're looking at scholarship guys that haven't seen the field yet. All these offensive eggs, and Mike Shula, the first-year OC there in Columbia, all the eggs in his basket have been under Rahsul Faison and the Utah State transfer being running back one. I went to the spring game. He only had 8 or 9 touches, man, but he looked the part. And South Carolina sort of transfigured this signing class in the transfer portal around Faison as the gem. So if he's not declared eligible by the NCAA, I think that's bad news for this offense.
Smoke, good running game helps the receivers and vice versa. Obviously, everybody knows about Nyck Harbor. He's pretty athletic. But when we're looking at him, are we talking about a first-round type of talent, All-American?
Tom, that's a hard one, my man. Because what has he done? He's a fast guy. He's a height, weight, and speed guy. So if you're going off of what a receiver looks like coming off the bus, yeah, that's the first guy that you're taking. But when you study his play in terms of being a route runner, reliable, strong hands, and understanding how to play the game of football, like he's not there yet, not even close. Like he has to master playing the position first before we start talking about these mocks. And mocks always look good because you can just throw a guy in there that can run a 4.2 at 6'5", 240 pounds. But I remember when I evaluated him, I was at Maryland as general manager, and we sat down and we discussed Nyck. We knew that Nyck was going to be a project.
Right.
Because he was a track guy that was playing football. He wasn't a football guy that was running track. And you saw that with his inability to firmly snatch the ball out the air on a consistent basis. And as a receiver that's a big height and weight, contested 50-50 ball guy, you got to have strong hands. Because his inability to sink his hips and get out of breaks to create separation is limited. But that's nothing bad. DK Metcalf's levels with that too. But if you can run a 4.2, 4.3, you're going to back up DBs off of you.
Right.
They're not going to be that close to you, Brad. So you're going to be able to make those plays. But I just haven't seen the production or the developmental growth with Nyck Harbor yet to have that much conviction of talking NFL with him.
I agree with you. And it's really hard to be a premier wide receiver one in the SEC when you only have essentially 2 seasons, 3 off seasons, that is, of learning a route tree, learning how to beat man coverage, something that Nyck has not done so far in his career there. He's been only a one route guy, fly because he's fast, right? You're right. Hands have been an issue. He's had drops in the past. I think the biggest thing Nyck Harbor has to fix this season is the physicality standpoint. You go back to signing day a couple of years ago, I think some of South Carolina's staff, looking back, may have been better suited putting him as a rush linebacker or off the edge, took advantage of some of that finesse moves he has and some of that speed because he's not physical enough right now to be a 1,000-yard guy in the SEC because teams are still pressing him at the line of scrimmage. So until he's able to engage, disengage, and get open and catch the ball with fluidity. I don't think he's going to be a wide receiver one for the Gamecocks this season, despite having a great offseason, the best I've been told of his career.
Well, man, that's great because we always know that recruiting was always the bloodline to all of us. Tom, speaking of recruiting, this weekend, let's discuss all the big-time official visits for this past weekend around the country. And let's start with Florida. Gator fans, who should the Gators fans be looking forward to this one name coming out of last weekend official visits?
Yeah, as you can see on the list there, it was absolutely loaded. You had Dante Moore, a 5-star. I mean, it really was a talented, loaded group in Gainesville. But for me, it's Jake Krell, top 247 edge, really right inside the top 100. He is a incredible talent. This guy just gets after the quarterback. He's relentless on the trail. You're talking Florida, Colorado, Ohio State, Texas, Oklahoma. But the one thing in the Gators' back pocket is that the Gators are his dream school. So there can only be one of those, and that's in favor of Florida. So as of right now, and I know he's got some visits left to take, I think Florida's a team to beat. I ran into him in New Orleans at a football camp down there, and he was kind of raving about Florida. He didn't want to give too much away, but I think the Gators are in a good spot right now.
Tom, which prospects do you think Georgia moved the needle for this weekend?
Yeah, that was another one where they had the number one running back in America and Savion Hyder, a 5-star cornerback, and Chauncey Kennan. But for me, it's offensive lineman Ekene Igboku. I mean, this is a kid that his brother's already on campus there in Athens. He's considering Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, Notre Dame, Florida. But in the end, I just don't. And I've said this. We had him on here to drop his top 5 at one point on the Ultimate College Football Show. I just don't see any way that Georgia misses on this kid. They have done such a great job since day one. Coach Searles, Coach Smart, everybody's working on him, his brother. And I think the family's preference would be to keep them together. And obviously that's leaves the door open for interpretation and transfer portal and all that stuff. But I think in the end, Nnamdi Ekene, they're going to all be together in Athens.
Tom, USC's been on an ultimate heater in the last few months. Who should the Trojan fans be keeping their eye on?
That might be an understatement of the show, but you had a five-star safety, Jet Washington, who's looking at USC and Oregon, and I think, but for me, it's Talanoa Ely. He's a top 247 linebacker, one of the best in America. He's looking at USC, Oregon, Texas, Notre Dame. This is a kid that early on, Oregon absolutely led. The Ducks were the favorite. They had a stranglehold on this, but ever since USC got the new coaching staff there with Max Steinecker, Dre Brown, Chad Bowden, the entire staff has made him priority number one. They have treated him like a 5-star, and he's really right on the cusp. He's 54th in the country. I think USC gets this done, and I think it's going to be soon. Not bad, right? USC's doing a pretty good job.
And they got a Ryan in there. Rob Ryan is also the coach.
He was looking, I forget what they did, like an official visit weekend, and he was looking dapper. I mean, he's ready for Hollywood and Los Angeles. But we got some burning questions. I don't know if we got 1, 2, but it's about that time. Let's close the Ultimate College Football Show with that. Let's see what the first one is here. We got Gamecock for life. Love it. I nailed that. If I put my house on the line for Lenoris Sellers winning the Heisman, what's the chances I go homeless? Brad, you can take this one.
Throw it to me, yeah. How did I know that was coming? Yeah, I'm going 90% you're going to be sitting on the curb in Columbia somewhere without a roof over your head. Because the talent around Lenoris is not good enough for him to win the Heisman, and the schedule is too difficult. For this to happen, Lenoris has to put up, first of all, single-season record numbers at South Carolina. He's got to have 2 or 3 wide receivers who are probably future NFL draft guys. I don't see those right now on the roster. And there's a couple new offensive linemen, and Rahsul Faison, his top running back, has not been deemed eligible yet. So it would take Lenoris Sellers pulling a rabbit out of the hat in South Carolina, getting to the playoff, perhaps even winning the SEC to win the Heisman Trophy. He's a long shot, in my opinion. Certainly talented enough, but it's not going to happen this season.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that at the end, Brad. Talented enough. But we just sat here and we talked about, and I thought, receiver play, not really big. As a quarterback, you're going to need some receivers to catch the ball and score some touchdowns. We don't know who the running back one is going to be. Mike, like you said, Mike Shula, first-time OC there, working with this young guy. No knock on Mike, but continuity is the key. An offensive line play for me, Brad, is the biggest issue with South Carolina. And I don't believe you want to have an offensive line issue in the Southeastern Conference. because your quarterback's going to get touched often, a lot, and he's going to be on the ground, and he might be running for his life. So, homeless, don't like to say so, but you said sitting on the curb on top of his car, maybe.
I will say, though, a name to know, Malik Clark, freshman wide receiver. Brad, I know you know him. I think this is a guy who's going to be in that breakout. We're talking about Dakorien Moore being a national breakout guy. It wouldn't shock me if he's getting the opportunity, which I think he will. I think he could be a breakout. We do have one more question from, which I believe is our very own Brett Greenberg in the chat over at Bama 24/7. Thoughts on Sam Utu to Bama? Brett, that's kind of a softball for me. I feel great about it. I think that's a guy that I think will end up with Crimson Tide. I know Brett's been all over him, one of the top offensive linemen in America. I think Utu ends up in Tuscaloosa with the Tide.
Man, Tom, that's good news, because when you talk about offensive line, that's something that Courtney Morgan prides himself on. Just talking to him, and we sat back and we always talk about just building team and roster philosophy on how do you get really good really fast and stay consistent there. And his number one thing was always, I have to make sure that we have enough offensive linemen on our roster, at least 3 deep, to make sure that we can function, protect, win ball game, and play a physical brand of football, which he's known for at Washington and at Michigan. That's the type of presence that he wants to bring in Tuscaloosa.
Just to make it clear, while we were on the show, I believe, as we were prepping, he did actually commit to the Crimson Tide. So felt good about it. Chris Krapilevich, the offensive line coach in Tuscaloosa, all over and made this kid a priority. And our West Coast guys really led the way on this over the weekend. And clearly the Crimson Tide laid it out during the official visit. So huge pickup for Alabama. But that wraps it up. As always, you can catch the Ultimate College Football Show every Monday and Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern. For Smoke Dixon and Brad Crawford, I am Tom Loy, and we will see you all next time.